Welcome to this episode of the Good for America podcast. I'm your host, former Congressman Bob Good, former chair of the House Freedom Caucus. Want to remind you to subscribe to the podcast, rate the show, refer it to your friends, and follow me on social media at Rep Bob Good. I'm particularly excited today to have one of my closest friends from my time in Congress, the great Andrew Clyde from Georgia's 9th District. Andrew, welcome to the Good for America podcast.
Well, thank you, Bob. It's great to be with you, and it's definitely good for America.
Well, Andrew, thank you for making time to be with us today. And for folks who maybe aren't as familiar with Congressman Clyde's background, I'm going to do a little bit of an intro on him. Again, he's one of my closest friends from Washington, D.C., one of my closest colleagues in the House Freedom Caucus. Again, he represents Georgia's 9th District, the northeast part of Georgia. We came in together as freshmen after winning in 2020. Both of us assumed we would be serving our first 4 years in President Trump's second term in office. Now, of course, Congressman Clyde is serving alongside President Trump in President Trump's now second term, but it's Congressman Andrew Clyde's third term in D.C. He's a graduate of Notre Dame's ROTC program. He has an MBA from the University of Georgia. He's a retired Navy commander, a combat veteran with 28 years of service. He owns and operates the famous Clyde Armory in Athens, Georgia. He famously sued the IRS and won for all Americans and all small businesses regarding illegal civil asset forfeiture by the federal government. Before he came to Washington, he testified before Congress. He helped pass the RESPECT Act. He also sued the city of Athens over unconstitutional, illegal COVID shutdown restrictions. So he has fought government tyranny and fought for freedom his entire professional life. And I will note that he and I were the primary fighters during our 4 years serving together on the issues of our national monuments and our national memorials. He was a leader in that respect. He's on the Budget Committee, the Appropriations Committee, two very powerful committees, very important committees, especially in light of our fiscal situation in Washington. Most importantly, he is a 5-year member of the House Freedom Caucus, and he's on the board of directors, the leadership team in the House Freedom Caucus, and he is married to his wonderful wife, Jennifer. So Andrew Clyde from Georgia 9, thank you so much for joining us. I want to jump right into the pertinent news of the day, the sad news of recent days with the assassination of our friend Charlie Kirk. And I just wanted to give you the opportunity just to share your thoughts on what our response should be to what took place just a few days ago, what we take from this horrific act of violence, of murder, and where we go from here and what it means for our country.
Well, thank you, Bob. First, I think the first thing that we need to be doing is praying for Erica and for the two little ones there. This is devastating for them as a family. And we should be lifting them up in prayer. And, our God is an amazing God, he's a God of comfort, and he can bring comfort where we really see no comfort. And so that's the first thing that we should be doing. But we also have to realize that what Charlie Kirk was doing was an incredible thing. Not only was he proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ, all right. Which we are all to do, make disciples throughout the world. But he was bringing to America something very, very unique, something we don't see here on Capitol Hill at all. And I'll give you a great example of that here just in a minute. But he was trying to bring civil discourse back to this country. Any leftist, any radical leftist that would challenge him, he would speak civilly to them, and he would invite them to bring forth their arguments, and he would debate them. And honestly, he would literally disassemble all of their arguments because they really had no foundation. And when the left has no legitimate truth to speak of, then what they do is they get louder and they get meaner. Right. They start yelling. All right. Thinking that volume is going to, be persuasive and is going to win the day. And that's just that doesn't work. Not when you have legitimate factual arguments on your side. And that's what Charlie Kirk brought. And we can never, ever, ever let that momentum die. He was bringing it to the college campuses. They silenced one Charlie Kirk but we are going to make a million or millions of Charlie Kirks out of that. And we are going to light a fire that will never be extinguished because we are the right side. We have truth on our side, and we are going to aggressively bring that forth, and we are going to debate, and we are going to show our nation exactly the path that it needs to go on. And that is civil discourse, but we will also protect our own.
I think, well said, Congressman Clyde. I think often in these recent days about the example of the apostles in Acts chapter 4, when they were arrested for talking about Jesus, for talking about the resurrection, and they were arrested for preaching the gospel of salvation through Jesus Christ. And when they were arrested and warned to stop talking about him, afterwards, the Bible tells us when they reassembled back with the other disciples, they prayed for boldness and courage. They didn't pray for safety and protection. And so Charlie Kirk, as you noted, a Christian brother who was very outspoken about his faith, he exemplified that or modeled that for us. And so it's important, don't you agree, that we cannot shirk away from being bold, from being courageous. Charlie Kirk knows better than anyone right now that what matters is things of eternal significance.
That's exactly correct. We have to be bold. We have to be courageous. Be strong and of good courage. Be strong and of great courage. That's what we have to model right now. And we cannot shy back. We cannot shrink in fear. We have to be fearless because what we are saying to the people is the truth, and it is what is right. And, God created this country. He created it on a Judeo-Christian values basis, and we are not going to let our founding fathers down. We are going to keep that torch burning bright, and we are going to pass it from generation to generation. And that's exactly what Charlie Kirk was doing. He was passing it from his generation to the next younger generation, and we have to be doing exactly the same thing. We can never fail our founding fathers or fail, the country that God created.
Well, as one of the courageous conservative warriors in this country, one of the few, frankly, in the House, I would submit, you understand the importance of taking a bold stand. You understand the issues and the things that matter and the things that divide us. What concern do you have for those who would say, hey, this is a time for us to come together with, I'll say, the other side, when there is such a fundamental difference in our disparate worldviews, our vision for the future of America, our value system, the principles in which we believe in, our recognition of where our rights come, what our purpose is in this life, what the purpose was for the founding of America. What concern do you have with those who would say, hey, we need to sort of set differences aside and unify with those who hold very different views for our country than we do?
Well, first off, I would say the differences are between good and evil.
Right.
You cannot partner with evil. You can't set your differences aside and go, oh, okay, you who are spouting evil, yeah, I'm going to partner with you. I'm going to work with you in that way. And a perfect example, as I alluded to at the very beginning of the show, is what happened on the House floor. Just literally
Yes.
the very day that we had the moment of silence for Charlie Kirk. The whole place went silent. But then one member, after this moment of silence was over, said, hey, can we actually have a verbal prayer from the dais? Mr. Speaker, can we do that? Because, silent prayer oftentimes gets silent results. And so can we have a verbal prayer? And I kid you not, it was like an explosion went off. The left just lost their ever-loving minds. And they started screaming and shouting that this is, that no, absolutely not. Let me tell you something. There is nothing with which to partner when it comes to evil conduct like that. I mean, here we're on the House floor trying to be civil. They want nothing to do with civility. You cannot partner with that. And then, when the news media tries to espouse that, oh, well, this violence is coming from both sides. Absolutely not. This is not coming from both sides. This is coming from one side and one side only. And that's the left. The radical left is spewing this vitriol that is damaging our country, because there are some who actually take it to heart. And there are some who are so brainwashed that they're willing to take this vitriol and they're going to put physical action to it. And that's exactly what we have seen with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I mean, you cannot partner with that. You have to call it out. You have to say what it is, and you have to demand a retraction of it. You cannot partner with that.
You're exactly right. And that's a perfect segue. I appreciate you bringing those points up because you are among the top 2 or 3 most consistent champions, most courageous fighters in terms of protecting our Second Amendment. It's in your blood, it's deep within your bones. And you have fought courageously on that issue from before you got into Congress, and certainly over the past nearly 5 years now. Even in the big bill, you were fighting for Second Amendment protections in that respect. But on that note, I think you would agree with me that oftentimes in our history, the tyranny of government, the suppression of our constitutional freedoms, the expansion of government, the intrusion of government into our lives has often happened in the wake of crisis, of tragedy, of emergency, based on emotions. Think of after 9/11 with FISA, or think about during COVID, what the government did to us. What concerns or what caution might you espouse, or would you voice to those who you talked about the pure evil that manifests itself with the assassination of Charlie Kirk most recently, and the other side, the left's recognition or belief that violence is an acceptable means to defeat your opponents politically. But when those who have called for stripping away Second Amendment rights for those who are transgender, speak to the difference between those who hold a belief system or a value system versus those who've demonstrated a propensity for evil or violence as we apply any Second Amendment restrictions to those in those respects.
You know, anytime we have a tragedy where a firearm is involved, I think back to evil deeds do not trump constitutional rights.
Right.
All right. In fact, constitutional rights are there to prevent evil deeds. And if we allow the evil deeds to triumph, all right, and strip away those constitutional rights, then we have indeed lost. And that can never be allowed to happen. If you look at the transgender population, that to me is a mental issue. Whether it's simply believing that you can change your gender, where you cannot do that. I mean, you are male or you are female all the way down, from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. And the people who believe that have what's called gender dysphoria. And that is indeed a mental illness or a mental disease that has to be properly treated. Now, if they're going to be judged by a court to be, incompetent, etc., then there's a pathway there for their Second Amendment constitutional rights to be put on hold. But until you actually deal with that from a court basis, until they have a hearing, you cannot take away someone's constitutional rights, simply because you accuse them of something. All right, that's just not the way our Constitution works. These are God-given rights. Unalienable God-given rights, just like you can't tax a constitutional right either. I mean, that's prohibited, but it's a very dangerous path to go down. And when people say, well, this is a gun problem, this is not a gun problem whatsoever. This is a mental illness problem, and we need to deal with it that way. I mean, we've eliminated so many of our asylums in this country that I don't know that we have any left. And so our ability to deal with these issues has been minimized, and we need to fix that.
You're exactly right. When someone believes they are or wants to be the opposite sex, obviously if something is wrong with them, it's a spiritual issue, a psychological issue, a moral issue, a mental issue. However, to your point, we need to make a distinction between what somebody believes and what value system they hold, the morals they hold versus their propensity or demonstration that they're a violent threat to those around them. And you can easily see, if we go down a path where we're stripping away Second Amendment rights because of what people believe, how the next Democrat administration, the next Democrat president says, pro-lifers, they shouldn't have guns, or parents who go to school board meetings or stick up for their children shouldn't have guns, or Christians or Christian nationalists or people who are too religious, they shouldn't have guns. And that is a very dangerous place for us to go, to your point, with respect to the Second Amendment.
Totally.
On that note, when you think also, you're in the administration has begun to say, hey, we're going to be going after some of these left-wing groups. We're going to be holding accountable these left-wing groups that have expressed violent intent or supported criminality or supported violence. Talk a little bit about the distinction there between, again, we don't want to go after groups because they hold left-wing worldviews or even socialist, communist views, but it's more about their willingness to support violence or to call for violence or criminality. Talk about the difference there as the administration might be looking at some of these groups who they've identified that they're going to look into, who could be contributing to some of the violence that's going on in our country.
Well, today I actually was speaking with a senior FBI agent from the state of Georgia, and I asked him the question about that. And there's a line that you have to cross. Having a First Amendment right is absolutely essential, and it is paramount. It is God-given. It is in our Constitution, and it shall not, be stripped. But when that First Amendment right translates from belief, and speech to actual action itself, all right, and that action then becomes a criminal action, or it becomes a violent action, then they have crossed over that line. And that's where you have to look at it and say, okay, like Antifa, for example. I think Antifa is being looked at to potentially be called a terrorist organization. Well, now you're going to have to look at what have they done? What have they physically done that would put them in that category? Not what they've said, all right, but what have they actually done? And if what they've done rises to that level, then absolutely they get to be designated as such. And the people who are then a part of that then will have to feel the consequences. Same as the people in this country who have celebrated, Charlie Kirk's murder, his assassination. And they're getting, many of them are getting fired. Those in the military, and we have what's called the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the UCMJ. Well, they're held to a higher standard because they serve in the military. And if they're going to, espouse these beliefs, all right, and denigrate our military because of it, then there's going to be a pathway out of the military for them. All right, they still have the right to speak, but they don't have the right to a job, and especially a job representing our country and wearing the cloth of our nation. There's a different standard there. So you have that issue that they're going to have to deal with. They have the right of free speech, but they don't have the right to choose the consequences of their free speech, especially when it comes to private employment.
Well said. I want to pivot to the fiscal crisis and the affordability crisis in our country, our national debt, our spending, our deficit. Again, you're on the Appropriations Committee, so you're on that powerful committee that determines how we spend our hard-earned taxpayer resources. You're on the Budget Committee, and I often say most people don't think Washington has a budget committee. We do. We just don't do a whole lot of budget management, so to speak. But you're trying to fight against that and have been doing that for during your time in Congress. But we had a record $291 billion deficit, round off, say $300 billion in the month of July, the highest number outside of a COVID month. We've got a record, as you know, $37 trillion in debt. Republicans, I would submit, are in danger of running on $40 trillion in debt in the midterms next year, unless something drastic changes. How do you feel about the efforts of Congress, with Republicans with full control of government, so the Republican government, I should say, House, Senate, and White House? How are we doing addressing the fiscal crisis? How are we doing trying to adjust the debt trajectory? And so talk about that. And then as we approach the September 30 fiscal deadline, what you see playing out in that respect.
Well, there's a couple of things here. One, the thought is a continuing resolution right now, and that is in order to keep spending flat. One of the best ways that you can do that, all right, is to keep this, keep the spending at a level just straight. Now we can work on appropriations, and we have done that. We've moved all 12 appropriations across the finish line in committee. We've not done all of them on the House floor. The problem comes in the Senate when you have 7 Democrats that are required to hit that 60 vote threshold in order to bring a vote to the floor of the Senate. You've got to get them to go, yes, we're going to have, yes, we will vote to end debate, and we will vote to go to a actual vote on the House, or excuse me, on the Senate floor. And these Democrats want something, and what they want is increased spending. They don't want the budget of the president, which is actually decreased spending, significantly decreased spending. They want increased spending. They actually want $25 billion more in spending than what was actually in the bills that we have right now. And we cannot allow that to happen. So what Chuck Schumer doesn't want is he doesn't want a continuing resolution. He wants the appropriations where they can use their leverage of those 7 senators to get increased spending. And what might have to happen is we might have to hit that CR for a couple of months in order to keep spending flat, and then literally challenge Chuck Schumer at the end of the month to go, okay, are you the one that's going to shut the government down? If the Republicans can pass that continuing resolution in the House, then force the Democrats in the Senate then to eat that continuing resolution so that we have more time for our appropriations. But I'll tell you this, if we continue to do continuing resolutions, which I don't like them at all, especially the Democrat policy that's in them. Although the mitigation for that is the fact that we have a Republican executive and they really then implement their policy. But we have to get President Trump's policies into law. We have to codify it. And we can do that through the appropriations process if we can ever get an appropriation conferenced and actually passed by both the House and the Senate. And that's the kicker right there. But what we have to do is literally move this continuing resolution and challenge Chuck Schumer that if he wants to shut down the government, he can do it. And it's going to be a Schumer shutdown. He's going to be the one that's going to be responsible for it and not the Republicans. And every day we go into a shutdown is a day that we actually give President Trump and Russ Vought more power to control or reduce spending. So it does have a silver lining to it in the reduction of spending. The continuing resolution does over the appropriations process. But the approps process has its silver lining is Republican policy if we can keep it in the Senate.
Was there any talk from the Speaker about not taking the August recess if we hadn't passed all 12 bills on the House? You noted it's been a long time. It's been since 1997 since that we passed 12 spending bills. Was there any talk from the Speaker earlier in the year that the August recess wouldn't take place if we hadn't passed the bills?
No, not that I can recall. We actually finished our last appropriation bill on Wednesday of last week. So that would have been about, the 12th, I guess, was the last appropriation bill. So it was, it's literally a month and a half late is what happened for us. And
you guys, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And that was, and that's been a problem. Although I will tell you, it's better than the year before. Okay, we are actually getting better. We might actually have 3 bills conferenced and ready for the appropriations to be passed on the House floor and the Senate floor. That's a possibility, and that's moving forward. But we have to break the dynamic here in Washington D.C. of putting an omnibus together and throwing one out right before Christmas and everybody going home. We've got to break that.
What do you think is going to happen with respect to earmarks? I've heard some supposed conservative members talking about doing earmarks, adding earmarks into a CR. There's also rumblings, of course, that some Republicans wanted to extend the Obamacare subsidies that expire at the end of the year. What do you expect to happen with respect to both of those issues?
Well, there's never been a Republican that has voted for those Obamacare subsidies. And
Right.
honestly, they need to go away. We are no longer in COVID right now. And when you look at the Obamacare subsidies, you can actually see the amount of money going to the insurance companies for those Obamacare plans for which the government pays 100% of it. You know, before the Obamacare subsidy, it was about 20% of the plans the government paid 100% on. After the ACA subsidies, it went to 40%. 40% of the plans the government pays absolutely 100%. And some people don't even know they have those plans because they already have insurance from somewhere else. So it's the insurance companies that are truly gaining on this and gaming the system, if you will. But those subsidies have to go away. We don't need them anymore. And it's costing us about $40 billion extra every year just to have those in place. So that's a real issue for us, the Obamacare subsidies.
I hope that Republicans are willing to hold their ground and to stand on that and refuse to fund those. Last question for you. If Chuck Schumer doesn't cave like he did back in March with the Republican CR that I think every Republican but one voted for, if Chuck Schumer refuses to play ball with those 7 Democrat votes we need, what is the Republican stomach to stare down the Democrats, make them cave in a shutdown fight, or worse, do what Democrats want to do in order to try to keep the government open? What is your concern or your prediction in that respect?
No, I actually think that the Republicans this time will have the ability to stare down the Democrats. This will be a Schumer shutdown, absolutely a Schumer shutdown. And the Democrats really can't handle that, not like Republicans have. Now, Republicans really don't have much of a stomach for it either. All right. But I think the Democrats have less of a stomach for it. But when Chuck Schumer is going to be responsible for federal employees not getting paid, for our military not getting paid, and handing over tremendous power to President Trump and to Russ Vought for what stays open and what doesn't stay open, that's a really high bar for them. So I don't think that. Yeah, I mean, if they go the route of a shutdown, I think they're going to realize very, very quickly it was the wrong way, and we're going to extract. We're going to get some things for having them come back to the table. I don't know what they're going to be just yet, but I think we're going to force some good policy on the CR because of if we go to a Schumer shutdown, in order for the Democrats to get out of a Schumer shutdown.
To your point, I hope Russ Vought, the OMB director, will designate all federal employees as essential. Dems have said they're all essential. They shouldn't be laid off. And just tell them you're not going to get paid during the Schumer shutdown. You're not going to get back pay. And then you guys can vote on separate bills to pay the military, to pay Homeland Security, to pay those who are in law enforcement, and let the Democrats vote against those if they want to. Well, Congressman Andrew Clyde from Georgia, I know you're short on time. You got to go vote on the House floor. Thank you so much for making time to join the Good for America podcast. I want to remind our viewers and our listeners to subscribe to the podcast, refer it to your friends, rate the show, follow me on social media @RepBobGood. Let's keep the Republic.